You're tuned in to the MtG Cable cast, where they cover Magic, the Gathering finance. All right? You don't know about it? You're tuned in right now and get ready to learn some shit. Buckle your seat belts and light a blunt and get ready for the MtG Cable cast. Starring Reptar and Thirsty, them onion head motherfuckers.
Alrighty, guys, welcome to the newest episode of the Cabal Cast. This one's got a pretty big doozy. We'd had a plan for an episode this week, and then an announcement was made that changed everything.
Absolutely.
And that is, as I'm sure you have heard across the Magic sphere, TCGplayer acquiring ChannelFireball. And what that means. So basically, we're going to be looking at a lot of the information that was presented through articles, tweets, whatever. That'll be in the show notes. Mm-hmm. There's three things we're going to cover. It's why the acquisition matters. Is this good or bad for stores on the whole as well as vendors? And then, you know, some other things that may or may not be relevant. Yeah. So, with that said, let's get it started.
Yep. So, I think the most hotly debated element of this that I saw is why this matters. And so that's why we wanted to put it up top. And people are talking about, they want to go behind the scenes and say like, oh, TCGplayer was just trying to unionize and this and that and the employees, etc. But bigger than that is why this matters. And that is the creation of effectively the Amazon of trading cards or collectible card games, however you want to look at it. There's a little more that TCGplayer does, like they tried to get into Pops, etc., and there's some stuff on the peripheral, but this really does create the monopolistic platform for this.
Yeah.
And I think that is what matters, because now players really, inside the United States, really only have one choice for a marketplace.
Yeah.
And in my notes, I just broke this up into a positive and negatives, and I put this in the negatives because, and I said this as sarcastically as I could in my own voice, in my head, where are you going to go? Bidwicket? That is legitimately the only other non-eBay marketplace I could think of that the average consumer would go to. There's still Facebook and there's still Twitter and sales like that happening. Again, on the peripheral, they still represent the open market. But that's, to me, why this matters most. And again, there's a lot to this, and this is why the debate was there, because like without external competition, now people aren't as incentivized may not be as incentivized to price as low as they had to race to the bottom to sell out. Prices might float a little bit higher, which is not great for the average user when the price of the game is already extremely high. Again, this is monopolistic, so TCGplayer can start extracting fees to any percent that they want, because again, where are these people going to go? And that's kind of what worries me and why this is extremely important. This is why this acquisition matters the most, or this part matters the most.
Yeah, I think, you know, as much as we all exist in an unregulated economy, because guess what? That's what Magic is. It's just an unregulated economy. Mm-hmm. Monopolies are bad even in unregulated economies. The thing that's really interesting about this, and I'm going to try to put a more positive spin on it rather than just harp on, you know, monopoly bad. The interesting thing about this is that TCGplayer's websites and POS sucked, but the platform was great. BinderPOS's websites and POS are amazing.
Yep.
But the ChannelFireball marketplace was a dumpster fire. It was so bad. This solves both of those problems. The real interesting thing to me, that's why this matters, is BinderPOS is based entirely on Shopify as a platform. And why that matters is because Shopify allows for custom SKUs. It allows for remote POS. It allows for a lot of things that smaller stores really benefit from. Mm-hmm. Chiefest among them is capital loans.
Oh, okay.
So now having this integration with BinderPOS may be long-term for stores, because now if you're going to sell on TCGplayer, you may as well have your BinderPOS up.
Yeah,
And that ties in very easily to Shopify, which can lead to capital loans.
which sounds like a better solution overall than the TCGplayer website. And is it Nexus? Is that the in-store terminal that they're purporting people use?
It's so bad.
Yeah.
It is just abject garbage. Not a fan at all. But BinderPOS, like, literally is one of the most seamless systems I've ever used inside of an LGS, both as a consumer and as a proprietor. It does literally everything. The more important thing to this, about why this matters, is one of the things that people have been harping with platforms like Crystal Commerce that are multi-platform, allow you to have your website and your TCG service. This kind of eliminates the need for those platforms. So this may actually put companies like Crystal out of business, at least in the TCG sphere. The other interesting thing to me is that one of the problems with Crystal that this kind of solves is if you're on Crystal Commerce or if you're on any of those integration platforms and you've had your inventory live for a kickback weekend, you know how bad inventory errors are, and they tell you basically you've got to catalog your inventory separately for in-store and just hold that back. You may not have to do that now. So in terms of options, this may be good. One of the bad things, though, is, and there is an excerpt from the email they sent out to everyone that uses their platform, where they said something to the effect of, don't worry, you can still expect the same great level of service from TCGplayer. And what that says to me is fee structures are probably going to get worse. They're not going to stay the same, and they're certainly not going to BinderPOS levels. And TCG will still not give a shit if your website's down. So that sucks. But I think the in-store experience is going to be a little bit better.
Yeah, there's a lot to talk about later on about what happens when you merge two tech organizations and things like website support, because BinderPOS presents their own solution versus TCGplayer, which presents theirs, and what falls out. So before we get to that, though, you started to move in towards a section to discuss about stores. And for the LGS ecosystem that's either on Shopify or SquarePoint, or Square POS, whatever it's called, it seems like it's easy to move into the BinderPOS ecosystem primarily because of the SKUs, which is what a lot of people want, why they would move into an online solution at all. So as far as the LGS is concerned, if they're not really engaged with the CFB marketplace, this seems like it does kind of incentivize them to make that move. Now you don't have to try and figure out which one am I going to use or both. You just have that one. And for me, that seems, somebody on the outside looking in from an LGS, that seems like a better option, especially because on the TCGplayer marketplace, I believe the sales velocity overall was a lot higher. And by moving from the CFB marketplace to TCGplayer, that means you're going to be in their ecosystem and in front of their customer base, which was, to my belief, and why the sale went down most likely, a lot larger.
Yeah, for sure.
Now your products are being exposed to that many more people overall, and so that seems like a boon to the LGS.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, one of the worst parts about the channel marketplace was, it seemed like everything was great about it. Fee structure wise, everything, sales, giveaways, they did all the right things marketing. The problem was it's just like someone to try to break in now and occupy the same place as Star City Games. It's been around too long. It's entrenched. You can't really compete with TCGplayer on that level. And I think TCGplayer, who has been shopping around for a lot of very interesting software add-ons lately, saw a huge opportunity in BinderPOS because they've already done the legwork for this amazing system you can have in an LGS that just makes it so much easier for you to integrate your inventory with an online platform and have access to all of it at once. So, hey, we can just pay these people that are already doing it, that already have done it, and just not care. Let them do their thing, and that's what they did.
Yeah, they just start folding in other organizations into some best-in-class opportunities and build out a much better solution for both the LGS and the visitor alike. From a vendor perspective, I think this is, again, great for the same reasons that an LGS would enjoy this, which is that I don't have to decide which platform I want to be on, or both. I'm going to be on the one platform now and just work with that one platform. I'm still going to have my own website and my own customers, but I can and will list items in these ecosystems that I know sell well there compared to my website, or my physical store will list on that site. And I don't see that going away, and I think this is a boon overall, as long as the systems operate as easily as I imagine they will when you remove a lot of the overhead that and over engineering for underwhelming products that TCGplayer did, because they're at their core, despite the fact that they want to purport they're some kind of tech company, they're not. They are a sales platform first and foremost. Anything that they did outside of that was just an attempt to try and capitalize on a part of the market that they weren't in yet. Now they can actually bring in experts to do that.
And that's one of the hardest things, I think, for any company the size of TCG is properly locating those people, and they have now.
Yeah.
So
so it removes the need for these clunky solutions. They can just, to your point, go out and buy these interesting pieces of software or invest in hardware to better help their back-end performance in the warehouse.
Yeah.
And I think that's super useful and super powerful. Where this org goes, don't know, but if it's going to rise up as the one, now you've got to think maybe heading in towards, an Amazon style or box style solution. Outside of that, a lot of what sits on the periphery in this third bullet point, other points of interest are things like, ChannelFireball offered a grading service. They partnered with PCG back in November of 2021. eBay just rolled out their grading solution. So now TCGplayer gets to thumb their nose at both of those organizations. Or not both of them. They just got PCG. They got that. They get to thumb their nose at eBay. Now they have a grading service. So a lot of that trepidation that we talk about, especially for somebody like me who likes to buy things in person, there's a little bit more of an option for me, hopefully, to actually utilize this platform to buy some higher end product instead of just, again, doing it in person at an event. I can trust PCG grading, hopefully. That's something on the peripheral that not a lot of people are talking about, but definitely remains.
For sure. And I think another thing is, after the Good Games quote merger, there were some people on, I think, Reddit or somewhere who were basically saying, oh, well, now they own Good Games, so TCG owns the store. That's not how that worked. Channel sold their inventory to Good Games as the merger. They did not own the stores. The really interesting thing to me, and this is telling because it is mentioned late in the announcement, is that all of a sudden they mentioned CFBE is back. That CFBE is part of this acquisition. Now, CFBE, for those of you who don't know, was basically dissolved. Channel laid off all of the staff and everything.
So that's ChannelFireball Events, right?
Yes,
CFBE.
ChannelFireball Events, who ran GPs for years. For those of you who have been in this for a very long time, you may remember the TCG series. The TCG series was awesome. You basically went to qualifiers and they gave you point cards. And you could redeem those point cards for entry into their big event. You could also just acquire them by grinding side events, by showing up. Now, the interesting thing about this was that these effectively had monetary value because they were used to pay for your entry.
Yes.
So it created this weird trade economy for this stuff.
I remember TCG points in people's binders. Yeah.
Yeah, you'd put them on the back 2 pages and just hey man, you want to even out the trade? I got these points, or I want to even it out. You have points. But it enabled a lot of modality then to the game and the trade aspects of it. Now, the reason that's really interesting is because, of course, we've gone to a non-centralized tournament organizer structure with Wizards of the Coast.
Yeah.
Now, TCG, having a events company under its banner, can now run official games or official events for Wizards of the Coast. They can run official events for Flesh and Blood. They can run official events for Dragon Ball Super.
And Pokemon.
Digimon, Pokemon, all that stuff. All of a sudden, you can now have a TCG player version of it.
Yep. And there is something I do want to point about this, because it is actually a bullet point that I had. I had it in my negative section because they tried this already twice, and both times it failed. But to my knowledge, the first run was a lot longer than the second. The first run was the one with the point system.
Yep.
And all those events that you were trying to grind into were cash events. So it was like a 1K leads to a 5K to a 10 to a 50. And I can't remember if the final event was a 50, 75, or a 100. That's basically where you were trying to go.
Yeah.
But it was a limited scope event in terms of location. So because they're out in, is it Syracuse, New York or something?
Yeah.
Basically middle of nowhere, northern New York State. That's where people were grinding, so the events to get you there were a little more localized to the Mid-Atlantic and New England, so it wasn't a huge reach. And at the same time, the Star City event series was coming up, and ChannelFireball was now holding more GPs. So their either desire or want to compete just kind of fell off, it felt like. And it's not like people didn't enjoy these or they weren't high profile. There were people on their way to becoming pro players. Like I think Caleb Durward played in a bunch of them.
Yep, he did.
One of the main issues was that there wasn't really any coverage of these events, so people just kind of got disinterested in them. CFB brings a lot of that. They patch a lot of these holes. The second run that TCGplayer did, that's after the dissolving of states and regionals. TCGplayer and Star City were kind of jockeying for those, and you could play in TCGplayer states, which I did. You could play in Star City states or regionals, which I judged, and they went back and forth. And that wasn't a points-based system. TCGplayer just wanted to get people involved in a tournament circuit, and they might have tried to jumpstart another one off of that, but it never really got anywhere. Star City also ended that run pretty quickly too, because there was no end goal. Star City's regionals didn't even feed you buys to their invitationals and stuff like that, so it was just kind of this weird time. As far as CFBE coming in, I thought they were still running callings and things like that, so my assumption is that if TCGplayer wants to get back into the tournament series, that's the perfect one to just kind of shoehorn in, because the parent company takes care of, from my understanding, a lot of the overhead costs for those events. So all TCGplayer has to do is really do the location scouting and the rest of the logistics ahead of the event. The parent company takes care of everything, including talent for coverage. So why not? And then, start competing in Star City if WotC wants to begin holding independently organized events again.
Yeah.
Just run it. I came at it from the perspective of, well, they failed once definitively. Why would this be a positive? Why wouldn't they just shed it? But I never thought about like Flesh and Blood and all the other games that CFB events actually brought with them, which I think is super important. Also tied to this is the content creation that ChannelFireball did.
Yeah.
We don't know what's going to happen with them yet, but if they are brought over to TCGplayer, that again creates one of the largest networks for something in the collectible and trading card game community. This time it's content of any and all sorts for a number of games. And they become a hub for content, which I think is something they've been trying to do for a while.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, when you talk about all of these different products that they've added and these strange collectibles, remember when they announced, we have Pops. They've been digging around for a while for, let's try to get sports cards on here. I don't know how many times they've announced it now, that, we're bringing sports cards out. And then you think of not just like Pops and stuff, all of these games. Did you know they have HeroClix on there?
I felt like I did for a minute because I was probably looking for some specific X-Men.
Yeah. Fair. Like Star Wars Destiny, this is something that not only is it good because, it expands the network. This is something that in expanding the network can give new life to these kinds of things that are not really dead, so to speak. They're still, you can call them a dead game, but people still play it.
Yeah.
All of a sudden you have access to this stuff. This does create that almost not really troll-esque type collectible company, but it's kind of close. And to me, that's huge.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that when I was looking at the list of what they sell, and it's like all these dead games. Like,
Yep.
if there's one thing you could count on the Troll website at any given time, it's that they're hosting products for dead games because people just love them.
Yeah, they do. It's absolutely incredible.
Yep.
And all of a sudden now you have a marketplace for this stuff, because if you look at, the Troll list, the dead games are a little bit different than what we've got here on TCG. Like, obviously you'll find like Argent Saga and Chrono Clash and Hero Clicks, but there's a wealth of selection here on TCGplayer because of how easy it is to get set up on the system.
Yeah.
So it'll be very interesting to see what happens with some of these more fringe games, because if you have someone like TCGplayer who has an in-store POS system, and they are admittedly the premier site to buy, sell, and trade cards, or buy and sell cards, sorry. If I'm coming out with a game, I think TCG is one of those people I want to talk to, because especially if they have an event series that they're doing all of a sudden, well, now I definitely want to get in on that, because they can showcase my game for me and sell my game for me.
Yeah.
All of that is good.
Yeah, that visibility, that representation is hugely important. Yeah. Absolutely. The last couple bullet points I have really are just around the merger aspect. And This is what I mentioned up top, right? So you're basically merging two technology companies into one. And it's kind of interesting to me to see that it was the marketplace that bought into the effectively website provider.
Yeah.
And not the other way around. Usually it's the website provider that goes out and buys the marketplace, because the website provider has more clientele. But to the point you made, ChannelFireball entered this game so late that TCGplayer had already established itself as this monolithic thing.
Yeah.
So setting aside the merger of the tech stacks and how long that's going to take, from my perspective, and people who are wondering, well, like, what does this mean for the employees? Basically, anybody who isn't immediately important to the merger of these tech stacks and support of the binder POS systems, see ya. You're gone. You got a little bit of time as everything moves over and they find out who's going to take on what, but that's it.
Yeah.
That leaves a lot of duplicate effort, duplicate positions, and duplicate titles that will eventually get sorted out over time as the tech stacks merge and they determine which teams are best to maintain these. And I wouldn't be surprised if it's really only senior level development from Binder POS that survives this, their customer service teams that survive this, and anybody who deals with their internal documentation and client-facing systems that can speak to problems that anybody will face as they set up a new website or work on the product, etc. Because that's some of the hardest knowledge to transfer, because you might document things as best as possible, but there's a ton of tribal knowledge that exists no matter how hard you try and suss it out and put it into text somewhere.
Yeah.
Moreover, merging documentation systems is also a huge pain in the ass. There's so many ways you can do it, from Confluence to SharePoint, and those are never smooth and things get lost all the time. So that's going to be an internal struggle that will keep people on longer and actually secure some jobs, which is nice. But we might even see people shed from TCGplayer because their binder POS equivalents are just better equipped to handle what's coming out on the other end. As far as warehouse staff and everything like that is concerned, since it's all done through the LGS level, there is no warehouse for binder POS. There's nothing really to worry about on that end. I don't remember them saying anything about centralized inventory. Right?
No, I don't think that's going to happen, other than, a direct program, which already exists. Yeah. So it'll just be literally the same warehouse it's been. So, cool.
Yeah, exactly. And it's not like a lot of this changes quickly. There's going to be a lot to suss out. Probably like a year or two of a lot of this internal, who's doing what? Why do we have duplication here? What can we get rid of going on before we really see the full churn of employees and the full merger of the tech stack.
Yeah.
But it is exciting. I never thought about this as a possible competitor to Troll, but it definitely seems like it could kind of come up in that space. I know for a while, Troll's Evo product, whatever the full title for that is,
Yeah.
the Evolution, where you basically sell through them, was meant to mirror TCGplayer years ago, but I don't know if they're continuing that offering and what they're going to do in regards to this merger.
It's going to be very interesting to see. I think, I would expect it at some point to compete in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Because if there's one thing that both Channel and TCG love, it's making money off of selling other people's shit.
It's true. Put forth minimal effort for maximum profit, yeah.
And if there's one thing that Troll has been really good at for years, it's making money off of selling other people's shit.
Yep.
Really good.
Yeah.
And I fully expect that to be what happens.
Yeah. Odd question as I was thinking through something. Did TCGplayer, the year they introduced, or maybe the summer they introduced their buy list feature, have a booth at Gen Con?
They did.
Okay. And
Yep.
were they just buying there, right? They were just...
Buying and advertising, that was it.
Okay.
Hey, we're here, we're doing a thing.
Yeah, I'm kind of curious if that booth kind of rolls out again, if that experience ever moves forward.
I would not at all be... I would fully expect it at this point. I don't think there's any way it doesn't roll out again.
Yeah, if you're primed to be, no pun intended, the Amazon of CCGs, and you want to actually set up a fulfillment by TCGplayer style thing, and you're letting people sell cards to you via their system, why not actually do it yourself instead of having it meld and use these captive audience events to fill those buy list holes?
Yep.
So it seems like something that definitely could be done. Anything else in the potpourri section? Anything?
Got nothing else for potpourri.
Okay, I just want to double check my notes. Yeah, we mentioned the grading stuff, which just kind of is weirdly just easy to pass over.
Yeah.
It's like, hi eBay, we see what you're doing. Yeah, lost. All right. Yeah, that's it. Picks.
Let's do it.
All right. I think you went first last week. Did you?
Sure.
All right, I'll go. Cool. That lets me talk about this big dumb sorcery.
Oh, heck yeah, we love those.
All right. So this week, it took me a little while to find my pick, but I finally settled on Eerie Ultimatum, a card I've been watching since October of 2021. Basically, after it did a little bit of recovery, so it releases with Ikoria. It's not in Sultai colors, so it just tanks to 0. Maintains a firm hold, is basically a bulk rare until I add it to my list, like I said, around October when it had bottomed out, and then we just kind of see it rise and fall. But the reason I'm looking at it today is because while Card Kingdom was buying 0 in October of 2021, they are currently buying 59 and $1.50 as of me writing these notes, and as of recording they are now buying 67 at $2.05. So in the last 24 hours this has increased in price by about 40%. The set foil is holding steady at about $8. They're buying 12 now, up from 8, same price though, so there's definitely some movement on Card Kingdom for this card as of late. Now, what does this card do for EDH? It's just, man, Abzan value. Abzan of all flavors wants this card. It's a finisher in a control deck, it's a value piece in mid-range, and it's a combo piece in combo. But the other thing it does is play with Ruinous Ultimatum, which I found kind of interesting. To play in 5-color, because I guess after you destroy all non-land permanents your opponents control, you just want to stunt on them with Eerie Ultimatum. I don't know, I couldn't figure that one out. But within EDH, this is in 25,000 decks of a possible 142,000, which is 18% of all possible decks, and I think that includes Abzan 4-color, Abzan and then 5-color, which is insane. I don't think we've actually seen a card like this before. I did a little more.
This is huge.
I did a little more digging because I found that stat insane. And when looking at sorceries only on EDHREC in terms of popularity, it's the 11th most popular sorcery found in decks submitted to Rec over the last 2 years, 14th most popular in the last month, and 14th most popular in the last week. That is behind, regular ramp spells, Jessica's Will, Chaos Warp, Swords to Plowshares, sorry, not Swords to Plowshares, or Warp, those are instances. But, man, even Jessica's Will is an instant. I am off my game. But ramp spells and other ridiculous spells. Let me pull it up real quick just to give you guys an idea. Yeah, Blasphemous Act, there we go. A bunch of ramp, Demonic Tutor. Demonic Tutor's in the top 6. Oh, I was right, Jessica's Will is a sorcery. Bangerang, Vandal Blast. It's right behind Vandal Blast. This card is insane. So, it was hard for me to define what this is doing in the format because it does everything.
Yeah.
This is such a better season's past. If you're not playing this in Abzan, or 4-color or 5-color, I just think you're wrong, or you're not playing a game plan that goes this long, because this card does everything you need it to do. It returns any number of permanent cards with different names from your graveyard to the battlefield. That's the majority of your graveyard. You just put it right back into play, and swing out, or combo out, or you've taken control already. I think this card is just purely foundational and entirely overlooked, and it's really difficult to say, what this is doing, because it just does everything. The decks it's played in are just so varied about what they're doing. It's honestly difficult to put a finger on it. And so all I could come up with is, if you're not playing it, you're just wrong.
Yeah.
That's it.
It is absolutely wild to see. Because if you had asked me, and this was something when we were discussing the pink, you were like, did you know it ranks here? I'm like, well, I mean, I'm thinking Ponder, Preordained, Demonic Tutor, Imperial Seal, Wrath of God, Rampant Growth, Cultivate, Farseek, which we do see there.
Mm-hmm.
And then you actually look and you're like, oh no, this is getting played more than a lot of those cards.
Yep, this is above Ponder, Reanimate, and Windfall immediately. Above Toxic Deluge. Yeah.
That is wild to me. Above Verdict.
Yeah.
Victimize. There's all these cards that, I just never in a million years would have expected this card to be more popular than. And this is one of those things that, to me, when we talk about the Invisibles, this is something that, plain as day to see on EDHREC, to me is your ultra casual invisible types at work.
I thought so too. I thought it would be Ruinous Ultimatum that would be the standout, because it does exactly what people who play Armageddon want cards to do. It is not Armageddon, obviously, but it just it does the rest. It and Armageddon get the job done. And I've played Eerie Ultimatum before in my Kenrith deck as a value card, and I knew it was strong, but I didn't realize that it was 18% of decks strong.
Yeah,
and
which is insane.
Yeah, and I think this is just a card that people need to reevaluate immediately, both for play and for purchase. For a timeline on this thing, in short order, we will run out of Light Play and Near Mint copies on TCG, to the point where they will begin to reach Card Kingdom resale price, and that should trigger a market correction. Currently, the rise over time of the CK buy-list price allows for an amount of arbitrage until the prices meet parity, which, based on sales quantity, we can see might be within the next month, give or take a few days. We were seeing just a small number of copies sold per day, so when you just math it out and add up all those copies, it's about 30 to 36 or something like that.
Yeah.
And after we hit that market correct, or that price parity, and the expected adjustment of CK buy lists, anything we pick up should be profitable at a small percentage, and the longer we hold towards 3 and 6 months out, the larger margin we should see. I wouldn't expect a sudden uptick in price unless content is produced that showcase Eerie Ultimatum, but just a slow and steady burn on this card. Reprint equity for this, I think, is super duper low. This is not the first cycle of ultimatums we've seen. And
Yeah.
historically, ultimatum reprints are saved for supplemental products of multiple types, and that's where I would expect to see this. Like, I think Titanic Ultimatum was in one of those versus decks, like Phyrexia versus the Coalition style stuff. Otherwise, the other ones came in Commander, like Cruel Ult is in there, Brilliant, etc. But most likely in an Abzan Commander deck is where I would see this, rather than a draft set, because these are so clunky to cast. So I don't think we'd see them in a Masters of any sort. So a reprint on this could be a really far out. And I don't know if it even kind of makes the cut, because they're hesitant to put cards like this in Commander sets. Like, at any point in time, we could have seen a Seasons Past reprint in a Commander deck, but we have not, and that's just mono green.
Yeah.
As far as buy quantity is concerned, I have about a dozen of these thus far, and I'd be happy buying another dozen if I could find them for between $2 and $3. I don't see a reason just to not slam it.
Yeah. I think it's a really good one. I think, to your point about reprint equity, it's certainly not going to be within the next year just based on the sets we have. Mm-hmm. Dominaria is not shard-based. Brothers War is going to be an artifact set, not shard-based.
Nope.
So if we do, now that the Commander decks work the way they do, we almost have to have a set that's shard-themed. And I just don't see that happening anytime soon,
I think the only product that operates outside that, because it literally does, is the Warhammer 40k stuff, and I don't think we know what's going to be in those decks, because besides obviously Space Marines, but isn't there like a Necro army of some sort, like a Necro race where this kind of Golgari or Abzan theme could shuffle out?
Yeah, and they'd be certainly, I would think, based on like Necrons in the game.
Yeah, that one.
Probably more Esper than anything else.
Oh, okay. I really don't know that universe, but as far as something like that in my mind works, it would be Golgari based. But if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. So if there's really nothing in the Warhammer universe that speaks to Reanimation and Golgari or Abzan or whatever, then we are looking at a fairly long time for a reprint on this card.
Yeah, which is good. I also think this is kind of an opportunity for, if you want to diversify a little bit. Mm-hmm. The borderless is around $4 to $5, which for EDH I think is an easy out. Not necessarily an easy acquisition, but if you don't want to go to like play sets at a time and you only want to get 3 or 4, that may be something to consider as well. I think obviously you'll get a better return on your investment by going smaller, wider on the non-extended art, but that is an option for people to consider. So.
Yeah, absolutely. The only reason I fell into the set version was because when I added this to my list in October, CK was buying 0 at 0, and I thought there was no way that this lasts forever. This is a card that's just too good. So I never noted the quantity and price of extended art, but you're definitely right. Aside from the promo pack, I think every version of this card is eminently approachable.
Yep.
And I don't think it really matters what version you move in on, but I wholeheartedly agree that the extended art versions are going to be easy to move as well. Yeah. It's a good look. Good call. Thank you.
All right. My choice this week is getting back to my roots. As you got back to big, dumb green sorceries, I'm going back to slumlording the reserve list, baby. Penny stocks. All right. So, Glacial Crevasses. Why am I picking this card? Because we're on the downturn of another spike in this card.
Yep.
Granted, the all-time high was, in 2021 when we hit like $6 for this card. You don't need to know what this card does. It's dumb. It's from Ice Age. It's reserved list. The low is like $1 right now. And there was a time where this was buy listing for $5 on Card Kingdom last year. That's insane. That is insane. Yeah. But as we saw with Fork, as we saw with Grimfeast, as we saw with Emberwild Caliph, as we saw with Unfulfilled Desires, inevitably the reserve list is cyclical, and once something gets into that cycle, it'll hit every time after there. This one has an added effect. I guess while you don't need to know what the card does, snowlands are relevant to it. So if we ever get another snowland again, which guess when this card spiked the first time? When Kaldheim released. If we get another snow set, we can fully expect this card to spike out of nowhere again. Not to mention your typical reserve list cycling in and out, back and forth. If you look at the stocks graph and you take a look at the spike where Kaldheim happened, you can see that there was a massive crater. And then all of a sudden, we spiked up again, and we've just been on a gradual downtrend since. So, ripe for the picking up now. Holding long term, this is something that in terms of quantity, I've got about 200 of them right now. Because I'm an idiot, I would not go that deep. I would go maybe 10 to 20 deep. Because I've lit $10 to $20 on fire for much worse for a longer period of time. Timeline-wise, though, that's where it gets kind of tricky.
Okay.
Because one of the things that we've talked about a lot recently is the economic situation going on and how that impacts hobby markets. We may see a delay in the reserve list cycle now, because this is not something that we've necessarily had to deal with since MTG Finance became this giant vehicle. Economy's been pretty good. We've had a regular cycle going. We've seen dips in the holidays, spikes during tax season. We didn't really have that this past year. We didn't have that spike during tax season. So this is something that you need to be aware of going into, even at 10 to 20 copies. You may be sitting on for a year or more. My first unload window for this card is probably going to be like March, April next year. So this is one of those where you get all your order in from TCG, you throw it in your long-term box, forget about it, and then in a few months come back and check to see where you're at.
Okay.
Because if we're in a better situation, come tax time 2023, this card may see a spike. If we get a snow set in the meantime, it'll probably spike again. We will see what the fall set release announcement is when they say, hey, here's our roadmap for the next year, which I fully expect to happen next month in Vegas. But
for the 30th anniversary, right?
Yeah, 30th anniversary. For now, what we're looking at is about 6 to 9 months for the possibility of a return on this. So this is one you're going to be sitting on for the long haul. But at the price point, it's one that I'm comfortable suggesting and myself sitting on for the long haul. Because it's not like it's a time vault or a, Idwin Afreet where you're investing $100 in this card. No, you're spending like 10 to 20, getting a dozen or so copies, and then just throwing them in a box.
Yeah.
That's it. Sweet, simple, dumb because it's a cycle and people think, oh, reserve list, and it spikes for no reason. This card isn't good. It's bad. It's real bad.
I mean, look, in multiplayer EDH, it's absolute poop. But whenever you...
It might actually be fun. Like, this is a group hug card. I can't believe I just said that phrase. Oh, my lord. Oh.
Yeah, just, a little Crucible, World Actions. You just return your one snow-covered mountain every turn with Crucible, and you're off to the races.
Yeah. Just fog them every turn. It's great.
Exactly. There's nothing
Throw
wrong
this
with
in
that.
Corona.
Oh, God. That's your problem. Now, I like seeing all this weird stuff come up when we can get ahead of it, because it just does speak to the fact that, you can make a little bit of headway by diversifying your portfolio realistically. Like, it just continues to prove valuable to pull into some of these weird reserve list cards that people don't remember are reserve list, so they're easy to pick up. They are usually pretty easy to find at the LGS level as well, unless they've already been bulked out, because again, a lot of this stuff from like Ice Age is just, or was, pure chaff.
Yep.
So just disappeared into the abyss.
Which is not a chaff card. That card is real.
It is very real. But it destroys, so it doesn't kill Merit Leash.
That's true.
Small
it
problem.
does, unfortunately, yeah.
I'll have to verify that one, though. I don't remember.
Isn't it non-black anyways? And is Merit Leash black? I feel like it is.
Look, the Abyss is weird. Destroy target non-artifact creature. That's it.
Okay. Non-artifact, sure.
Yeah, so it can't kill a Colossi, White Steel or Dark Steel, but it...
Yeah.
Because of that clause. And it can't kill Merit Leash because it's indestructible.
Relevant.
Yeah. Tabernacle is a little more relevant, but it's the same problem.
Yeah.
Same problem, different day. But it is this is relevant to know. The reserve list is pretty wide and pretty deep, and keeping an eye on it, not at all times, but having a decent understanding that, like, Glacial Crevasse is a card that I thought was not plural until you said it, is on the reserve list. Land Cap is on the reserve list. Like, not ice flows, but like sulfur flows or something like that is on the reserve list. And you don't have to be a student of the reserve list and understand everything that's on there, but understand that the opportunity to pick up anything from the reserve list will always pay out if you are willing to invest both the time and the money on it, and then be diligent about maintaining the status of your purchases to churn that money, because if you're not churning it quickly, then it's doing nothing for you. So you need to make sure that that investment vehicle is worthwhile. And this, again, continues to prove over and over what we keep saying. So I like the pick, and I like re-upping on stuff like this all the time. So unless there's anything from your side before we cut out, I think we're good to go.
Good to go.
Right. So we are at MtG Cabalcast on Twitter, Facebook, Patreon, and YouTube. If you want to get in touch with us, you can tweet at us there. Otherwise, you can reach me directly on Twitter at HaltIamReptar. You are
at Thirsty Sizzler.
And we'll see you next week.